Hi friends, it's Chari. Today I am creating this really cute, fun friendship Valentine card. So I'm using an older set, which is the tea-rrific and the tea-rrific add-on. I just felt like these cute little stamps didn't get enough love from me previously, so they needed some today for today's card. So I'm using some critters from both sets and then all the little tea party things from the main set. So just for my coloring, I am starting with my little hedgehog. There is quite a bit of coloring for this card. I'm going in with an E23 for the back part of the hedgehog. That's going to be sort of my base light color. And then I'm coming in with an E25 for some darkness. Now this did tend to blend out a little bit and you couldn't see, I was trying to make some little flicks so it had some texture. So I'm pulling out my E27 and just making some little marks to give that texture to that back side of that hedgehog. Now I'm using the E21 for the front part of its body, and I'm just adding a second layer of that same marker for shadows. I'm not using a different color. Now each of these little critters are going to have their own color for their accessories. So for the hedgehog, I'm using teal for the hat. And then for a little bit of contrast, I have some pinks for the flower on the hat. And I'll also use that light pink to color the inside of his ear and give the cheek a little bit of a rosy cheek. Moving on to the cute little fox, I just love his little top hat. That is probably my favorite part about this set is the fox in the top hat. That E97 is going to be this lighter color that you see me putting all over the fox. And then that YR27 is my darker color I'm using for shading. So of course just going on the bottom side of things and where that shadow would fall. Then I'll just go back in with the E97 and blend out the line a little bit. And just add a bit more shading where it may need to be a little bit darker. Then I'm pulling out that E21 again. That is what I used on my hedgehog, and that's what I'm going to use for the bottom part of his face, his belly, and his tail. Now I did try to blend it out a little bit with a colorless blender, but I didn't really like the way that looks, so I just went back with my E21 and added a little bit more of that ink. Now he is going to be in sort of a pinky purple shade, so I have pulled out an RV63 and an RV55 to color his top hat and add a little bit of shading. Then I'll pull out that V15 because I did want the band to be a little bit of a contrast, but still those same tones by using that reddish purple. Now I am kind of backtracking a little bit, pulling out those same teal colors that I used for the hedgehog. I wanted the little banners on the stump table to match the colors of my critters' accessories. So I've gone back to the teals and colored that polka dot flag, and then I'll pull out those same colors I used for the top hat of the fox to color that purple and pink flag. Now moving on to the cute little bird. I'm just using 2 shades of yellow to color her, and I've colored her flower and her hair purple, and of course her beak orange. Now for the mouse, I have some warm grays. I have a W3 and a W5. I kind of did opposite on this and did my shadows first and then my lighter color. I colored his belly with an E000, and then I'm pulling out my R11 to add little rosy cheeks to all my critters, even my little bird, and color in the ear of the mouse. And I'm going to give him some pale green accessories, so a pastel-y green. I kind of picked my colors thinking about conversation hearts that you get at Valentine's Day in those pretty pastel colors. This card could be a Valentine's card or could be for any day. You'll see when I add the sentiment that I did not get very specific for the holiday. Now to move on to my stump table, I'm using the E21 and the E00 to kind of blend it out. I want that to be very light on top. And then I'm adding the same colors to that little circle on the side where it looks like a branch has been cut off. For my mushroom, I have a R24. Now, this is the only red that I have on this card. I was worried that it might stand out too much, but it actually turned out looking pretty good. And I'm using that E00 for the, quote, white parts of the mushroom. Now moving on to the stump. This is a lot to color. So I'm starting out with E35, and I'm just going to color all over in all those little sections with that E35. It is kind of nice that this image is sort of sectioned off with those little pennant flags. Then I can go in with the E37 and start to figure out where my shadows are going to be. Of course, I want them on the bottom, but then I also want them beside and underneath those little flags. And then to define the edge a little bit, I'll put some there and some shadows underneath the line of the string that's holding the flags on. And then I can go back in with the E35 and start to blend that so that my line is not quite so harsh. And I did think that it might be fun to kind of draw in some wood grain. I didn't really want to distract from the image too much, so I'm just going back in with that E37 and drawing some lines. They're going to kind of fade out a little bit into the markers, and you won't see them too much, but it will add a little bit of texture. Now moving on to all my little elements for my table, I have some pink macaroons on that tiered tray. I'll color that tray with the teal color that I used for my hedgehog's hat. And then I thought that I would make the cups opposite colors. So I have a teal cup that's going to be for my fox. So I'm coloring the one with the handle on the right. And then my hedgehog's going to have a purple cup that matches the fox top hat and bow tie. So that is the one with the handle on the left. I didn't want it to be quite too matchy-matchy. Then I'm using those same pink colors that I used for the macaroons for the creamer and the sugar, just with some simple shading. And initially I did color that teapot brown since it looks like an acorn, but it didn't match all the other things. So I'm coloring one in the greens. These are the greens that are on my little mouse. And I'll just tell you right now, I did not end up using this on the final card. So I will use the coordinating dies to cut out all the images, and before I set these aside, I wanted to add the little monocle to the fox, and I wanted to stamp this directly on him so that I didn't have the white of a die cut. So I'm just going to line this up. I cut out the part where my head was in the way, lining it up. I'm lining up the little arch of the eye. And then I'm just going to stamp that down. And then he'll have this cute little monocle circling his eye, and then you have that little chain that falls down. I just think that's adorable. So moving on to my background pieces, I am going to be using the heart garland backdrop in landscape, and I'm cutting this from some narwhal cardstock. Then I also have a piece of teal colored spiffy speckles paper. This is going to be my sky. And then a piece of the green spiffy speckles paper, and this is going to be my grass. So I've just cut those pieces to fit my card base. That's a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And you can see there how that's going to work out. And before I start to assemble these, I'm going to cut the top of that green piece with the Grassy border die. So I'm just holding that in place with some tape. I'll carefully get that border out of the way, that frame, and then I'll die cut that. So now I have this grassy top to my grass. And actually, you don't see a lot of this once it's assembled because there's so many pieces on it, but it's just a nice extra touch. So I've adhered that to the bottom of my teal spiffy speckles panel, and then I am going to adhere the whole thing to a card base. And then I will use liquid glue to adhere this backdrop. That allows me to get a nice thin line of glue around all 4 sides, and then I'm going to also put a little dot of glue behind each of those little hearts. so that it is nice and adhered down to that background. I just love those cute little heart garlands. Now I'm going to start to put together my little scene. I'm going to put my little bird standing on top of the mushroom. That was the whole purpose of the mushroom, so that that bird could have a place to stand and not be down on the ground, be part of the little tea party. And then I'm going to use some different thicknesses of foam squares to adhere my pieces. I'm using the thick ones that I have for my table, so that's going to be in the foreground, and I'm making sure not to put a foam square at the very top so that I can tuck my little mouse behind it. And then I can build out from the center from my table. So for my fox, I'm using some thinner foam squares. That way he's not popped up as much and he can kind of tuck behind as well. The same for my little hedgehog, so it can sit behind the table as well. I'll use those same thin ones for my bird and my mushroom. I just wanted them to sort of be on the same level, not popped up too much. And then for my mouse, I'll use those thin ones, and it can be popped up from the background but also fit right behind the table. Now to set the table for our little friendship tea party. For this tiered tray, I'm putting a foam square behind it. This is the thick foam square, and just a couple dots of glue on the feet. That way the top of it is supported and then the feet are on that table. And then you see here I'm just putting out my little pieces, trying to figure out where I want them to go. So I've got the 2 cups of tea. I have that teapot, which I said I am not going to use, and you'll see that I am going to push that out of the way. It just took up a lot of room, and I liked having the little creamer and sugar instead. So that is why the teapot got abandoned. There were just too many things on the table. So now that I have my little pieces in place, I'll just use liquid glue to adhere these directly to that stump that is the table. So I have my 2 teacups and then my creamer and my sugar. And then that sets the little tea party scene. Now to decorate my garlands, I have the little heart dies that come in that backdrop set, and I'm going to cut 3 colors of pattern paper. So I've pulled out a couple colors from Watercolor Wishes, and then that yellow is from Spiffy Speckles. And I only needed to cut 1 run of hearts from each color, and it was perfect. It fit all these little garlands just perfectly. I had just enough hearts. And I'm just going to alternate the colors, and you can see I actually messed up. That should have been a purple one, but I'm going to figure that out here in just a second. And since I used some liquid glue and I'm pretty quick about figuring out my mess up, I can fix those little hearts pretty quickly. So purple, yellow, pink. I didn't want to do too many colors. I wanted to keep it more simple since I have so many colors going on with my images at the bottom. And it's really quick to just add a little bit of glue to each heart and then just pick them up and drop them right into place. So now for the sentiment, I use that folded banner that's also in that backdrop die set, and I'm cutting off the left side of it so that it can come off the left side of my card. I'm using the sentiment from the stamp set that says "Your tea-rrific," and this is where I said that this could be for Valentine's or anytime. And I'm using my ruler to make sure it's lined up nice and straight, just bumping the edge of the ruler against those stamps. Then I can pick it up with my block and stamp it in some black licorice ink. This banner is just cut from white cardstock. And I did this stamping before I folded it so that it laid nice and flat and I could stamp on it very easily. And now I can fold it on the score lines that the die creates. So you fold it back and then you fold it forward again, making a little Z fold, and then you get that cute little folded fishtail on the side. I'll add some thin foam squares to the back of it so that it's popped up a little bit and that little folded tail has a place to land underneath. And I will add a little bit of liquid glue to the back side of that tail so that it can be secured on that background as well. And I'm using this tiny little sentiment because I actually did not want to cover up all these beautiful heart garlands. That's like my favorite part of this whole card. And of course, nothing is complete without some glitter. So I'm adding some glitter to all my hearts on the garland. And then I'm going to go through and add a little bit of glitter accents to all of my critters. So the bow ties, the ribbons on the hats, the flowers, and then a little bit on each of the banners. And then here is my finished tea party card. I really love those sort of pastel-y Valentine type colors. I think that this would be a great Valentine's Day card to give to a friend, but it would also work for any occasion. So that is why I'm actually not going to stamp Happy Valentine's Day on the inside, so that I can use this for any time of the year. So I hope today's card has inspired you to go revisit some of your older sets and give them some love. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.